Next question is from L. Patrick G. How would you recommend the programming of plyometrics in conjunction with resistance training?
Maybe one of the most abused training methods.
Nobody ever does them right.
Very, very rare.
No. Now, have you guys ever programmed plyometrics for yourselves? Because I know with clients, I have for some clients, but typically I don't because plyometrics are explosive, more performance-oriented, and the average person...
Well, only with athletes.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the only time I'm ever even bringing that into the workouts.
Now, DeFranco really convinced me that there's a role for plyometrics for the average person, but he's not doing it necessarily in the same way as
it's a very controlled way to do it.
It is, and he convinced me. He said, look, if you don't practice a movement or an explosive movement, you tend to lose that skill.
Yeah.
And it made perfect sense because I know I'm feeling that in myself. So the way I typically would program plyometrics is either on their own or before I get into the heavy resistance. Now, the reason being is that, and this is after a good priming session or a good warm-up, plyometrics need to be done explosively in order to reap the benefits of plyometrics. The way a lot of people use plyometrics now, you can't call it plyometrics. All they're doing is fatigue jumping. They're just moving in ways to get them tired. Plyometrics aims at improving your ability to explode, to exert force, and to do so in a controlled, safe way. Well, the only way to be able to practice that is to be able to practice it explosively, and that does not work when you're fatigued. You can't practice explosiveness when you're tired. Now you're just working on muscular strength or muscular strength endurance.
You're going to reinforce, whatever degrade, you're working with in terms of like your form. Like, so if your form starts to degrade and you're practicing that through fatigue, that's going to come out in your performance out on the field and all the stuff with athletes. So I'm always making sure that, they regain that composure. Everything is completely ready to go. And because it requires so much of the attention to detail, the attention of I have to get my entire body to respond in a split second the way that is most effective for this. So if you're really trying to train it to improve, otherwise, yes, you're just reacting. You're going through something that's going to wear you out, which is part of athletics. It's part of a game. Sometimes you do have to endure long bouts of explosive type movement, but to practice it, to train it, is to be as effective as possible. So that way, when you're actually performing on the field, the way that you're moving is really sound.
Well, I think of it like this because, first of all, I don't think it belongs in most people's programming. Aside from the case that Joe makes, and I agree with that. Like I think if you don't use it, you lose it. And I'll give you an example of how I programmed that for myself because I recognized I was losing that skill. I hadn't done plyometrics for a while, especially when I was in the bodybuilding world. And I remember, and I shared this on the podcast not that long ago, where I jumped out of the bed of my truck, and I have an 8-inch lift on my truck, and I felt like my knees were going to explode when I landed. And I actually why it caught me so off guard is I never had felt that. I've jumped a bunch of times in my life. I played basketball, so of course I jumped a lot, but I had never felt that way. And it woke me up like, oh shit, like because I haven't done this in so long, like my mechanics were off and my body did not respond the way I want. And this light bulb went off of, wow, like, even someone like me who's very aware of his body and what he can do, and I could easily have injured myself because I thought I could do something and I just did it real quick. I wasn't loaded or anything hard, but I could have really injured myself.
And you bring up a point that is the counter to the explosive movement part. That's just the beginning. It's then how do you control yourself and land properly and stabilize quickly? You have to be able to stabilize and control yourself just as quickly as you're able to explode into this movement. And that's something that never gets highlighted in plyometric training. Nope. That's a fault to most coaches out there just hammering their athletes.
And that, to me, is how you program specific for something. Like, so right after that, and it was actually not that long ago or long around when we were talking to Joe, is okay. Now I see this is where I found myself in the gym the very next week, programming some box jumps, and the focus was exploding up and then the land. And I only did like 3 to 5 to start my workout, and that was it. And it was actually what was really clever, okay, to do this is on a squat day, because then it carries over into my explosiveness into my squats, right? So I get that post activation potentiation or whatever before I go into my squat. I also am training my plyometrics, so I have the ability to jump out of a truck and not let my knees explode. And so it has a specific application for what I want to use it. So there's how I would program that. Not long after that, I was talking recently about getting back in basketball before the whole COVID thing happened. Well, one of the things I know that I have lost, because I don't move laterally that often unless it's something that I'm training specifically in my routine, and I definitely don't do it explosively. So I know better than before I get on a court where I will need to go explosively left or right really quick. I need to start training that plyometric in the gym. So, and I shared this on my Instagram story like a few months ago, and I was doing these, and I had a bunch of people give me shit and were teasing me. But I don't think I'm and I think that was people think, oh, you think you're going to be like a fucking, super athlete right now. I'm like, no, I don't want to get hurt. And so I want to play basketball. And so I am training. I had the band around my knees, and I was just doing, 3 to the right, 3 to the left, explosive lateral moves with the tube around my knees just to start to strengthen that. And that's it. And I only want to do 3 because I don't want to be fatigued, and I'm completely paying attention to every bit of my form and technique over how many times can I do it or how hard can I do it.
Yeah, so I mean, really the easy way to break it down is the jumps or the movements that you're doing in plyometrics need to be explosive. You need to rest long enough in between your movements to allow your body to fully rest so that you can fully express that power again, and then stop way before you get tired. That's
it shouldn't be more than 2 or 3.
Yeah.
There's no reason for you to do 10 or 15 box jumps.
Not in a row?
Yeah.
No,
not if you're training plyometrics correctly and you're trying to get explosive movement out of it, because after that it just becomes more like cardio.
Yep.